Hello, and welcome to the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissland. Joining me, as always, Garrett Zatlin. How's it going, man?
Ben just came back from a lake trip with a bunch of college buddies, and the whole time I'm there, they're like, "What do you mean you're still working?" I'm like, "The Olympics," and they're like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." In reality, it's team rankings. The Olympics are like one graphic, but as long as they like give me my space and time that I need, it was a good enough excuse. So happy to be back. It was a ton of fun. Love those guys, but it was a good excuse to be like, no, I just need 4 hours, 3 hours of a day. So yeah, nice excuse to have.
That's the universal. Everybody understands the Olympics and can assume that, hey, if you're running a running website, that hey, Olympics must be important. Well, for us it kind of is, but really it's like you said, this is ranking season, and this is every year, not just once every 4 years. We got individual rankings that we just wrapped up. We're plowing straight ahead into team rankings, so that's what we're going to be talking about mainly today. But we will be touching on some more Olympic stuff, as there were a lot of really fantastic races that finished up since we last talked. Also, we have not seen any new Apple or Spotify ratings and reviews, so that is a little hurtful, but I expect those numbers to be up next week.
Yeah, not great, no bueno, but you know what? So be it. Team rankings is what everyone loves. It's reflected in our numbers, and I think we'll expect to see that yet again, especially with the Olympics now done. I've realized over the last week, I was like, oh, like Olympic coverage kind of takes away some attention, so that's okay. But regardless, let's talk about the Olympics and the race that we didn't get to talk about because we recorded too early from last week was the men's 1500. And do you have words? I don't think I have words.
No, it's funny because I'm in the middle of the work day. I'm just like, I forget what time the 1500 is on, and I just see our Slack group just explode, and I'm like, all right, I don't want to read. I don't want to I just see stuff is happening, and so I'm like, all right, I'm going to pull up, get Peacock up. I'm going to rewind a little bit and try to avoid any spoilers, and I just watch a masterpiece, absolute The storylines coming in where it was obviously Ingebrigtsen versus Kerr. You felt good about all three Americans making the final. You thought that Naguse and Hocker had chances at medaling. I think that was in the background, but they certainly weren't one of the top two favorites. And they come in, and it just goes about as well as you could have asked for from an American perspective. It was incredible. The speed at which Ingebrigtsen took this race out was stunning. I think it was 151 or something through 800.
It's almost like 152. Yeah,
it was just, blistering, and all the American guys just were seemingly unaffected, which I think shows you how far U.S. middle distance running has come. When Centrowitz won, that was a big deal, but that was run in a way that basically changed the event forever in terms of how it is run at an Olympic level, because they didn't want someone to just win with a kick, and now you have to be able to have that strength, and we proved as a country that we're able to do that, which I think is the most spectacular thing of it all.
I mentioned on the podcast last week how you never want to be reactionary, right? You never want to be like, well, this race was the best and this is the best runner ever. You never want to be reactionary to such monumental performances. And yet, I'm trying to figure out what American male distance performance has ever been of this magnitude. Because it's one thing to run as fast as Hocker did. It's one thing to take down the all-time elites that he did. It's one thing for him to be the underdog that he was. It's another thing for him to run as fast and then to also do it on the Olympic stage to win gold. I really do have to go back. Maybe I'm missing something that's blatantly obvious as the marquee performance of American distance running. I don't know if I am. And someone, please, in the comments, in our DMs, email, whatever, suggest something. In my lifetime, I cannot remember a performance as incredible as that. In my lifetime, I think that was the best American male performance, distance wise, that I've ever seen personally.
Yeah, I mean, you even just take it like we've seen obviously U.S. men win Olympic titles before. It's rare, but it's not something that we've never seen before. But like you said, the way that Hocker did it, and then on top of that, it wasn't like this was just one guy's performance. Where it's like, hey, that we have this one generational talent on the U.S. side that makes us look good. No, it was the entire team.
Mm-hmm.
And a young team at that. Like, this is not a group of like veterans going into their last like hitting their like end of their prime. This is a group entering their prime that they should all be back again in 4 years and be just as good, if not better. And I think that's what makes this performance all the more greater. Is this isn't just one fluky like guy that's just having a crazy day. This is a group of guys that are proving that if you make the U.S. team, not only are you a favorite to make the final, but you're also capable of medaling or even winning, which is something that we just haven't been able to say really in years past. And I think that is why, to your point, this is probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Olympic male performances that we've seen from the U.S. And it's certainly going to be one that I put in my YouTube catalog right along that Centrowitz race of just stuff I'm going to watch every like month or so when I just like want to watch a great race. Like, this is one I'm going to keep coming back to.
Yeah, I had someone who was in the hospital. They're all good, but they were basically out of commission for like that 2-day span of madness. And they're like, well, what happened? And I was like, oh, here's the link. Enjoy. Cover the title. Yeah, it was pretty wild. It was pretty special. The text afterwards, like, oh my God, can you believe it? Like, I know. It was pretty special. Speaking of special performances, Grant Fisher,
Yep.
3rd place, bronze, on in the 5K. The 10K I think was better. Couldn't tell you why.
Yeah, the 10K just felt like he had a better chance at like actually like winning at certain points or just like finishing higher. Like, whereas the 5K didn't. You never really felt like he was going to beat Ingebrigtsen. No. And I think that's probably what made it feel a little less significant. But still, I mean, just after missing out on the medals last Olympics, for him to get 2, and 2 of the most difficult ones to medal in, is an astonishing achievement.
I mean, we think his best chance to medal was the 10K, regardless, right?
Yeah,
even before the Olympics, we agree with that, right?
I think so. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I also want to transition to the men's 800 and talk about that, but also, I don't want to ignore the women because they ran well, but we didn't have a medal in the 15, the steeple,
or the 8.
Well, we talked about Juliet Whitaker in the 8.
Yeah, we did watch
the final, but she didn't medal. We didn't have anything in the 5K.
No, the 10K wasn't terrible. I mean, it was like, I think we finished 8, okay. 9, 10. Balby ran well. I mean, like it was a good group effort. It was just they weren't in it to have a chance at medaling, but they all ran very well.
Yeah, they hung longer than I thought they would.
Yeah.
Like if you had told me that like they were going to finish like in those spots, I would have been like, okay, sure, that makes sense.
Like cleanup duty or something. Yeah.
Right. But like the way that they did it, the fact that they were kind of in contention with 2 laps to go, which was nice. I was like, okay, cool. So like I want to like highlight the women, but I also they didn't medal. So I just want to acknowledge, but also have to call it how it is. Bryce Hoppel, however, did not medal, but he ran an American record, which is so crazy stupid to run 141, get the American record, and you do not medal at the Olympics.
So did I see something about one of the finishers being possibly like investigated by like doping, like WADA or something? I just saw a loose tweet and didn't follow up on that, but I was wondering if there is a chance that he gets bumped up. But But yeah, he ran a fantastic race. It was one of those things you didn't realize how good of a race he was running until he hit you saw the time, and you're like, oh, all right, he actually did literally everything he could have, and there was really not, you couldn't have asked him for any more from him.
It was Peter Bull who I guess there was a hearing, and that was ongoing. I don't know. Although I don't think
Yeah, he wasn't one of the. He's not the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, so I don't think that was it. But yeah. But man, I feel terrible. Like, of all the individual, I think, am I correct in saying this? Did we medal in every individual track event? Not field, but track event?
Except 100, the 200, 400, 400 meter hurdles, 110 hurdles, 800 we just missed, 15
we got, 5K we got, steeple we got, 10K.
Steeple we did, yeah. Yep.
So let's talk about steeple. Kenneth Rooks.
Well, before we do, so just to follow up on this.
Yeah.
Third place finisher, Jamal Sajadi of Algeria in the 800 meter final is under investigation for doping by the French anti-doping agency, according to L'Équipe, the French newspaper. So there's some kind of possibility that Hoppel gets bumped up to the bronze.
That's almost worse.
Yeah. It sucks. Like, yeah. I mean, it's like it just doesn't. Even if he gets the medal, it's never going to mean as much as it would have if he just finished third, got the bronze at the medal ceremony.
Which is not to say that he's less deserving.
No, it's just it sucks for him.
That does suck. Gosh, that stinks. Because he's always like, you and I follow the sport from afar, but we follow closely enough to the point where, like, I think you can get a read on people's personalities.
Sure.
You can kind of, you hear enough, you talk to enough people being like, oh, this guy's like, everything I've heard about Bryce Hoppel is only so positive.
Outstanding.
He's been like a great role model for the sport. He's been super consistent. I've heard only great things. And so when this thing kind of happens, I'm like, no. I was like the one guy who was maybe like, I don't, everyone's deserving, but the one guy who you're like, man, it would be really fulfilling if he got a medal.
Yeah.
It was Bryce Hoppel. And so I do hope he eventually, it should there be a verdict that does say that there was a violation, a sanction needing to be handed down. I do hope Hoppel gets it, but big Hoppel guy. Have been since he was in college.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, sorry to derail, but let's go to that steeplechase where, I mean, Kenneth Rooks legitimately looked like he was going to win. Like there was like, I mean, obviously as he's racing down the backstretch, and you're like, oh well, he's gonna get caught, and he does, but then he kind of like sticks with it for a while, and you coming off that water jump, and you genuinely believe that anything's possible at that point. Which is just, I mean, we've had great steeplechasers before. Evan Jager, obviously, prominent among the U.S. steeplechasers who have been super competitive in this event. But it's rare. I don't think we've really seen in the last few decades, someone seriously challenged for an Olympic title like that in the steeplechase. Like it just, and for a guy as inexperienced as him, who has just really come on the map in the last year and a half, it's just a staggering achievement. And he was so brave to do that move, and it paid off with silver. I mean, just such a incredible performance by Kenneth.
Yeah, someone was asking me about, like, my friends were trying to stay in the loop during the Olympics, right? As every passive fan does once every 4 years. And so they're like, so what were we supposed to do well in this? And I was like, no, not at all, actually. I was like, I thought Kenneth Rooks getting to the finals, I was like, mission accomplished. He did his job. He could finish last in the finals.
Yep.
Maybe not last, but, he could finish last in the finals. I'd be like, you know what? Still a good season for him.
Yep.
The fact that he made that move when he did, he started moving up like on the outside of that last, like, 2 laps, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, uh-oh. Oh my God. Is he going to do this? What was more like shell shocking? Was it his move with 200 meters or 300 meters to go? Or was it the guy passing out on that second to last, third to last hurdle on the backstretch.
Just getting obliterated.
Just
Yeah.
crushed. Yeah.
And he was, I mean, he's the reigning, I think, silver medalist too in the event too. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it was Rooks's move, because like that's just like that's a move you make. That's the kind of a move a reigning Olympic silver medalist makes. That's the type of move that is like, hey, I'm gonna go for broke. I've gotten silver before. I'm going for gold this time. I'm not getting second this time. That's the kind of move that someone who feels like they have nothing to lose makes, and isn't just happy to be there. And for Rooks to do that in his first Olympics in his first kind of race of this caliber against this competition, to put himself out there for everyone to chase, knowing that he probably will get caught, but just hoping that it at least separates himself enough to medal. I think that was the most stunning thing I saw.
It was impressive. How about this? What would you say relative to expectations? What was the more surprising result? Hocker winning gold or Rooks getting silver?
Yeah, I know. I think we mentioned this in our chat too. I think it's probably Rooks, just because like Rooks was not in anybody's list of guys that could medal, whereas Hocker, it was like, all right, he's arguably one of the favorites to medal. Like you could make a pretty compelling argument for him. He maybe wasn't the favorite, but he was on that list.
But there's a difference, like to medal versus winning, right?
Right. Yeah, and so I guess that is the point for Hocker. You had a Ingebrigtsen and Kerr in there, whereas although you're still going against the reigning Olympic champ in the steeplechase, who hadn't really lost in any of these big races for a while either. He was as commanding of a presence as anybody in his event. So I think I'll still go Rooks though.
Did you see that steeple prelim with Kenya's Saram? Did you not see that? So no. In, I think the first heat, second heat, I forget what happened. I think first heat of the men's steeplechase in the prelims, they're coming up with like 500 to go, and they're going over the final water barrier. But a guy from Spain essentially like comes up on Sarem's shoulder and bumps him just as he's about to go over the water barrier. So he, in a last-ditch effort, has to like push himself out of the way of the barrier, misses the barrier, has to then physically go around, leaps it. He puts together the most insane kick I have ever seen and barely misses out on an automatic qualifier. He does advance on an appeal, but it was like the most heroic thing I have ever seen. And he's, unfortunately, he faltered to 14th, but that was wild.
Crazy. I did hear about that, and that's that. The way you're describing it, I hadn't seen it before. That is, it's amazing you don't see more stuff like that happen during like these water jumps or even the hurdles. Like obviously we saw that in the final, just someone getting crunched by a hurdle, because those barriers don't move, and there's a lot of guys going over them at once.
Yeah, I'm honestly. And I could only watch so much of the replay back, but I'm surprised that Jirma of Ethiopia, the guy who fell and got knocked out, I'm stunned that based on the few frames that I could see, that no one trampled him, that no one stepped on him, which is like, thank God, because that would have been really, really bad. But I was almost more shocked about that than Rooks, frankly. So, but yeah, so that's my Olympics. Oh, real quick. Sprints, Noah Lyles.
Yeah, the COVID
flu game
diagnosis. Yeah, right before he still put together, like he clearly still was capable. Because he still finished second, right? Or finished third. Sorry, third. Big Nerix finished second, but. Yeah, it was just a shame because the 100, like we talked about, was always the one that was more questionable for him. The 200 was going, like, we felt really good about Lyles winning that event. And for him just not to be able to be at his A+ game is just a shame because, I'm forgetting the gold medalist's name right now.
Yeah, I got you. I'll figure it out.
But he ran a terrific race to Bogo
Bogos, yes,
Botswana.
thank you.
Like
To Bogo. Yep.
it's a shame because I think like even Lyles at 100%, I think would have had his hands full with Tobogo. Like I think like there's no guarantee that Lyles still wins, but it would have been an insane race to the finish. Like I just as a fan am just like sad that we didn't get to see that because I think those two guys going head to head in that race would have been fantastic.
I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's very clear that he was not at 100%. Lyles, like you could see that just by watching him. There's a small part of me that was just like, "Don't say you're sick. Don't. This
Yeah,
is
it
not,
was
it's
just weird.
not a great
The
look."
reaction after was weird and all that.
Yeah, not a great look. And Tobogo's like jawing him in the press conference after him, like, all right, dude. I mean, like, you still won the 100. Like, let's calm down. Like, it was a little ridiculous, but also Quincy Hall.
Yeah, that comeback.
I've never seen someone so dead put together such an incredible last 100 meters. All right, last piece before we move to team rankings. Sidney McLaughlin, Lavroni, is it Lavrone? I don't know.
Lavroni, I think.
Lavroni. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like, I mean, I thought Femke Bowl was like, had a legitimate shot at making this thing interesting.
Yep.
Sid said no, not even a little bit. 50-37 for what is her sixth world record. It's something stupid like that. Like, it's another world record. Is she the single most dominant track and field athlete that U.S. has? It's not close, right?
Oh, I mean, I think that the world has. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
like, it's Katie Ledecky-esque. Like, it's
Yeah,
like
it
she's
is.
like the only person you can really compare her to. Like, it's just because you look at the all-time list and it's like McLaughlin. Like, it's like the same way. Like, you look at those Ledecky graphics and you're just like, she's just swimming a different sport than everyone else. You can make the same argument with McLaughlin Lavroni because she's just. It's not even really a question of if she's going to win. It's not really a question of is she going to break the world record. It's just like to what magnitude.
To what degree.
And like every time she steps on the track for a major track competition, if it's the World Championships, whether the Olympics, you're expecting a win in a new world record time that's beating her old world record time. Like that like the fact that we are approaching a sub 50 400-meter hurdle time for a woman is something that I don't think anyone really ever expected to see in their lifetime, and we probably are going to see that within the next 4 years, which is just a stupefying achievement.
And she split 47 something on the women's 4x4, which easily took gold, which was like a crazy dominant performance. She's unbelievable. She's unbelievably consistent at the time. I mean, it's one thing to be this fast and this talented. It's another thing to be this fast and this talented while still progressing, while being this consistent. It's absurd.
I mean, I mean, you kind of put her in those the same categories as these other like child prodigies of like the LeBron James, like the Bryce Harper, like these kind of like athletes who are coronated when they're like 16, 17 years old and then follow through and exceed almost expectations, which like that is so hard. Like when you're a teenager to be given the weight of the world on your shoulders and then to come through and in huge ways year in and year out. I mean, is just, I mean, we could have predicted that she would be maybe one day a world record holder when she was making the Olympics at such a young age, but the way that she's done it and the way that she continues to just better the world year over year, I don't think any of us could have ever.
No. I mean, you're right in terms of like the LeBron level expectations and then like exceeding those expectations. Like and she's been a great role model throughout.
Yeah.
Like you want to talk about someone who's like you want as the face of American track and field or just track and field in general. That's who you want, like 100%. Also, fun fact: her reaction time was also the quickest. Not important, but I just thought that was
Well, and Anna Cockrell finishing second in that race was pretty wild. Like
Great.
to beat Bull was I mean, and 51.87 is it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, we're just like, oh, and Cockrell ran 51.87.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, okay. Whatever, just a second and a half victory. Yeah, no big deal. So, all right, let's move on. Going off of the Olympics to team rankings, our preseason cross country team rankings for Division One. We have already released our just missed and honorable mention teams. We have released 25, 24, and 23. By the time you're listening to this, we'll have released 22 and 21 at the very least, and I guess 22. We're probably going to go at least to 22. I'm not sure if we'll go to 21. We'll probably maybe save that for next week. But Ben, take us away.
Absolutely. So why don't we just start with some just missed honorable mention teams, and we'll kind of do this the same way that we did the individual rankings, where we can kind of just ask a couple questions, bounce through a couple teams that we're just interested in seeing or in talking about this upcoming fall, and then we'll go one by one on the teams that are actually ranked. So with that said, on the men's side, who's the team that you feel like has the highest upside out of our just missed honorable mention
teams? Highest upside, probably Washington. That's it.
Yeah, that's my answer as well.
Yeah, I think so. They have Acer Iverson, who I don't think has cross country eligibility, which I think is important to note. But Nathan Green returns. Evan Jenkins, we think, is a top 40 name. They have like a bunch of really strong young guys that a lot of them who return, like they lose Hauser, they lose Wascom, they lose, whoever, Dashbach returns. So I think it's hard to like look at last year, say, hey, they lose their best runner. And, like there's only so much that you can really do. Like at that point, you're just projecting. So I think we didn't really have a choice except to put them in just miss. But I think like you could argue 1,000 different ways about why this team is going to be better.
Yeah, and I think one piece that you didn't mention is Tyrone Gores. Like if he kind of hits on the potential that we think he can, based off of what he did at the high school level, and he can turn into a major piece for them, all of a sudden that lineup looks pretty darn solid, and capable of a top 25 finish at minimum. But I think he is a really important piece. Another team that just want to mention is Princeton. Obviously had a fantastic finish at NCAA's last year, coming in 11th. They do lose some significant talent, but we have seen this team be able to recruit exceptionally well, and they are bringing back some very good guys. Nicholas Benston is that main low stick for them, and then they got some other supplementary talent around him. They are going to need some improvement from guys. They're going to need some just internal, some of their younger guys to step up a little bit. But we've seen that they've been able to develop talent year in and year out. This might be a little bit of a like follow year for them as they get guys experience. But if things go a little bit quicker than planned, we could see them a lot higher than we expect.
Yeah, I like Princeton a lot. I think I just like Coach Vig. I think he's just a great coach all around. I think the recruiting in the last few years has been, like you mentioned, really strong. Their underclassmen are awesome, really good. So I completely agree. Really like Princeton. You could have argued that they should be ranked, and I wouldn't have argued too much.
On the women's side.
Oh, sorry. Yes, women's side.
What do we feel about? So same kind of question. Who do we think has the highest upside on the women's side?
This is easy. It's North Carolina.
Yeah. I was gonna say that I probably a week or two ago I would have said Colorado, just because of maybe there's some possibilities of still some transfers coming in, but like we kind of said last week, we still haven't really seen a lot of that happen. Because I think there is a world where, hey, all of a sudden they have a few women in the lineup that we weren't expecting. And they suddenly look a lot stronger, but I agree.
Yeah, I mean, North Carolina, they should return Bryn Brown. They should return Sasha Naglia. They will return Fatima Alanis, Taryn Parks, Kelsey Harrington. Like, all of those women at their peak form, that's a borderline podium team.
Yeah.
Like, which is the scariest thing I have ever, like, I wanted them desperately to be ranked. I tried to find every reason. The problem is that last year went so poorly. And then you're like, okay, well, that just happens. Flukes happens. People weren't available. But Brown, Naglia, Harrington, and whoever their fourth, Parks, didn't race after like mid-April of this past spring. So it's like I can't justify it at that point.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I asked like who's going to make us look the dumbest possibly for our individual rankings, and this North Carolina team is the epitome of that question. They could make us look crazy one way or the other,
really dumb,
because we are hoping that the upside is still a little there, and that's why they're in our honorable mention. But there's a world where they just run like they did last year, or there's a year when they revert to 2 years ago and they're all of a sudden a top 10 team. So yeah, I agree. For out of these teams, who are you kind of keeping an eye on the most in terms of what they could do next year? Like who do you feel like is preparing for a really good 2025?
Are we like talking about men now, or
men or women? Yeah, whoever you want, wherever you want.
I don't really like. I don't think I'm all that high on the men, and you could maybe convince me. Does this include honorable mention?
Yes, yeah. Anybody honorable mention just missed.
I'm going to go Wake Forest. I think it's the Wake Forest women.
Okay.
I like Brooke Wilson a lot. I think they've brought in a handful of really decent names over the last few years. Angelina Perez, let's say that she's somehow able to be in the peak form that we once thought maybe she could be. I don't. I just really like Wilson, and I know they lost a lot of good names from last year, but I think this year will be more about like getting a lot of the younger runners, the new varsity scorers into a position of experience, and then from there, I think I could see them, maybe even making the national meet come 2025.
I think I'll go with Colorado State on the women's side. I think that they're turning over the squad a little bit this year, and I think if they can continue to develop talent as they have, this group that has had experience at the national meet, and I think that they have a chance to maybe add or not add, but see a couple women improve to the point where they're kind of the faces of the next good Colorado State team.
Yeah, no, I'm still not just crazy high on Colorado State, but
it's more of a program like, hey, they've kind of done this before, and like on the men's side, I think like that's what you're kind of looking at for a lot of these teams as well. It's like you're projecting out like, hey, they've been able, like an Air Force, for example, like losing a lot of names, but hey, maybe this is a year where they could kind of give more guys some experience. And then in a year or two, this is a team that once again is a truly a top 25 kind of squad.
Who's the team that is like your irrational? Yeah, you irrational. Irrational. Like your irrational team that you like in the Just Missed.
Let's see here. I probably would have said Washington because I do always like what Washington does. I already know who your answer is going to be on the men's side.
Oh, I'm so interested.
It's going to be Michigan because you always like Michigan. No,
it's not Michigan. No.
Oh, okay. I'm going to go with Furman. I think that they like you see the outlines of a really good team already, and like if you kind of just don't look too deep into it, you can pretty much convince yourself, hey, this is a top 20 team, no problem. When you dig into it a little bit more, it's not quite as simple as that. But I do feel pretty confident that this could be a top 15, top 20 team by the end.
I really like Furman a lot. I think you could have, again, another team that's like, hey, if they wanted to be ranked, I don't think a lot of us would have pushed back on a 25, 24 spot kind of thing.
No.
So I agree with you. I think Furman they have like the prerequisite pieces to be a
Yes.
top 25 team. We need to see it all come together and be cohesive, but they have the right personnel for it. My men's team is Purdue. I like
Okay.
Purdue a lot. I think they have a really underrated top three. I think the combination of like a Walker and oh gosh, where were they? Yeah, Buckeridge and Caleb Williams. Like that's a really solid top three. I'm pretty sure they returned everyone. Nearly all of them were underclassmen last year. I just really like that they were fairly competitive. They still have a lot of gaps on the back end to clean up, and some of their top scorers do need to be a little bit more potent. But I think natural growth could have them cracking the top 25 if they have a really good day at a certain meet.
Yep. Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. For the women, I think I'm gonna go with Villanova. I just think they gotta be better, like than they have been. They return a lot of their lineup from last year. They have Sadie Sigstead, who I think obviously is that, like you said, prerequisite piece that you kind of need as a front runner. And I think they have the potential. And what I don't think is a super overwhelming like top or 20 to 25 like ranked teams on the women's side. I think they could easily, if a couple things go right, this becomes a team that is a lot more nationally relevant than they have been over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I like Villanova because Nicole Van Ness joining that team is like sneaky good. She was 12th at Northeast Regional Meet. And if you plug her into 12th place at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Meet, then Villanova goes from, I think, like 5th place at the regional meet to 2nd place and automatically gets into the national meet. So on like in pretty much every scoring respect, they bring back, I think, almost everyone except like one back-end name. So in nearly every respect, they should be better. My women's team is Portland. I like Portland a lot. They do lose Courtney Klatt, I believe, but Laura Pellicaro is a low stick who returns.
Yeah.
Flora Templier was 19th at the West Regional Meet. Maybe, I don't even know how to say that. Maybe Richardson. She's I think sneaky good. She had a few decent moments here or there of last year. A lot of this team, Janelle Aviez was a freshman last year. I think there's a really, really good contingent of women who I think this team could rally around, and I think they would not surprise me if they made the national meet.
There's a lot of room for internal improvement just based off the age of a lot of these women who are key figures, and then they have a savvy veteran in Pellicaro who can be kind of the one that eases and gives the squad a level of consistency, which I think is huge. So yeah. Do we want to move on to our ranked teams now?
Let's do it. Kick us off.
Let's start on the women's side at number 25. We have the Penn State Nittany Lions. So this is an interesting squad in terms of like, it's not like you have a ton of huge front running talent, but it's a squad that is deep and brings back a lot of women from last year.
So I think I disagree with you there. I think it could have a lot of front-running talent.
That's true.
So
there's potential there.
So last year's team was not a top 25 team. They made the national meet. They were last at the national meet. They weren't great. They had a lot of really tough moments. But Florence Caron and Sophie Totti were arguably the two best long-distance runners in the Big Ten this past spring. I mean, they were awesome. I mean, Caron made the outdoor national meet in the 10K. She ran in the 1530s for 5K. Totti ran 1540s for 5K. She was low 33 minutes for 10K. Like, they have suddenly taken this dramatic leap up. And I just struggle to believe that they're not going to be at least better than they were last year. I think Madeline Ulam was like one of the few constants as a lead scorer. She was like 6th at the Big Ten championships last fall. And when you start putting it together, you're like, okay, they return pretty much everyone else except one or two names, a lot of decent returners. And not only that, but Faith DeMars was pretty much a non-factor last year. Maybe she had some availability challenges, maybe injury, I don't know. But if she comes back to full form, she's running 1540s for 5K. I mean, at that point, you're looking at a team that they're not just top 25, they're top 20 and maybe flirting with top 15 if everything goes perfectly. So I think this was a reconciliation between the incredible improvements and the upside that we see with them this fall versus the clearly not great 2023 season that they had.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, just a lot of names. Like you can throw like Laura Roderick in there, coming in from Australia, ran 9:26 in the 3K, 16:60 in the 5K. Like it's just you have the prerequisite amount of lottery tickets for you to build out a solid back end. On top of the 2 or 3 runners that you feel comfortable being like top 100 finishers at NCAA, right? At the very least. And then you have a group that hopefully won't be more than 50 spots back. And all of a sudden you have a pretty condensed group of women at the national meet that are putting you in a position of like, you just have a very high floor.
What's their ceiling this fall?
That I don't know if I'm quite as high on them as you. I think like 15 is probably their ceiling, which is still really good.
No,
but I don't think that they have like a huge.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I would have probably said 15. I think that's probably their ceiling. So I don't disagree. Men's side, Gonzaga.
Yep.
Kind of unexciting, gotta be honest, but.
That could be the tagline of this year's men's rankings.
Yeah, that's true. Kind of unexciting. Yeah, like the name, that's pretty much like half of it. So, they're not bad. Like I don't want to like.
Someone has to be good.
Yeah. Like I like Will Smith a lot. We're still waiting for him to deliver on the national stage, and they've got a handful of good returners. And I think they only lose. I think they lose Michael Moriano. Like it's a fine, solid team that always delivers at the West Regional meet, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a couple of years now since I feel like they kind of took that big step up as a program, and they got to a level of national relevance. They haven't really been able to kick on from that, but they haven't dropped from it either. Really, they've been right around qualifying for the national meet out of a really tough region, and they're right on that bubble. It feels like every year. And they have a true low stick. And so when you could put those things together, as we're going to talk about in the rest of our men rankings, like, and now as we kind of let off, there isn't an overwhelming amount of teams like after like the podium favorites that you really feel very good about for a variety of reasons. And I don't know if that's because like, hey, a lot of teams are losing their men that had extra eligibility, and all of a sudden they're going to be relying on a lot of unproven talent. But that has been the case this year, and we at least know what Gonzaga generally is year in and year out, and we don't have to forecast every single spot in their lineup like we have to do with so many other teams.
Yeah, this year's men's rankings, there's like one tier, significant drop, another tier, significant drop. It's very pretty clear cut in terms of like the talent drop off from tier to tier to tier. So let's move on to the women's side. 24, Syracuse, another team that's I think a little more
very Gonzaga-like, honestly.
Very Gonzaga, yes, very Gonzaga.
You have the front runner, you have Savannah Rourke, and you have a team that has been able to exceed expectations in years past.
Have they?
Well. At times, I feel like in certain meets, I feel like every year they show a flash, and then we get excited about them, and so we're like, oh, we ranked them too low, and then we come to the national meet, and we're like, no, we ranked them.
Yeah, we got it about right. Yeah, it's the postseason, honestly, that I'm just like, no, like this, what happened? I mean, and here's the thing, it's like, I wish they would just at one point just be awful, because that way it's we could just be like, well, that's just a fluke, right?
Yeah.
Because they are probably better than like the back end portion that they've been sitting in of the rankings over the last few years. They're probably better than that, but you haven't quite seen it. And I like Rourke. I think she's going to be better than she was last year. I think Riley Lusk could be their second lead scorer. They lose two like really important support veterans, and I don't quite know or love what like how they might fill that in. I think they've got options with Nye Hernandez coming in via transfer, Heidi DeMio coming in via transfer. They got a decent number of returners.
Yeah.
But you do have to piece together a few patches with some speculation in their lineup.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at women like Olivia Jolly or Benite Baines who had okay runs at Virginia, but like you need more consistency one across the entire season, and you also just need them to be better than what they showed at Virginia. Like, so it's like not only you're adding a level of like, hey, this was your best race all year, and we need you to be a little better and more consistent and at that level for an entire season. And that can happen for like one of these women, but to bank on that happening for multiple and to really solidify that back in the lineup is a big ask. And I think that's ultimately why they land on our at 24 and not a little.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I'm moving us off. Moving us off of Syracuse. Going down to 24 on the men's side, we have Texas. Tricky team to figure out.
Talk about a team who lost a lot of talent out the door. Devin Hart transferring out half tonight, gone. They still have some very, very talented runners, but this just feels like a little bit of a changing of the guard for Texas.
Yeah, I think Roger Rivera is awesome. Like we saw what the best version of him was at the national meet, which I think we had kind of been waiting for. The problem is that he has pretty much been absent since last fall. Yeah, I mean, we haven't really seen him at all. And for someone who, we know what his talent is, but the national meet was frankly just an outlier, and so you kind of have to factor that in. It's like, hey, are we really going to get a 23rd place All-American again? I don't know if that's a guarantee by any means. And so you get that. You don't have Knight. You don't have Hart. They bring in a few really decent guys in terms of like EJ Rush. They've got a great recruit in Adam Burleson, who I think is a stud at the high school level. Emmanuel Segurus is like an awesome name. Isaac Alonso I really like. Like you can piece together a really, really nice core. It's just not going to be anywhere near as potent as what last year was.
Yeah, I mean, Alonso and Rivera at their best, you have two All-Americans right there, or at least potentials. Like, I mean, they've shown that throughout their career that when they're running well, that's their ceiling, which is like it's something that you can't say for a lot of these other teams around them. But it's not like these are dependable All-Americans, and that's the problem. Where it's like they have question marks. They clearly have the talent, which makes this team, I think, a little bit more exciting. But then behind those guys, even if you do pencil those two guys in at finishing high up in the national meet, you're relying on a lot of unproven but talented runners that maybe could pop, but you truthfully feel like they're probably going to be more 100+ type of finishers at the national meet rather than guys that can finish in the top 100 or really provide more of a solid back end.
Yeah, for me, it's Emmanuel Segurus, who's kind of the X factor in all of this. I think he was 67th at Nuttycombe last year, which I think is like a crucial performance. You kind of, I don't want to say you don't know what you're getting from him. I think we do know what we're getting. I think it's just a matter of, is there another step that he's going to take this fall? Because if so, awesome. Then this is maybe a team that's underranked, but you do have to, there's a lot of piecing together. There's a lot of best case scenario speculation. And so I think all things considered that it was appropriate to put him at 24.
Agreed. Let's go on to 23 on the women's side, and that is the Florida Gators. And this is a team that completely remade their lineup last year, and that lineup is pretty much gone. You have Parker Valby gone, Flamina Asicall, Elise Thorner, and Amelia Mazzadowney all gone. They do bring in Hilda Almamamwe, which is obviously one of the biggest transfer signings of the year. She will immediately come in and replace basically everything that Parker Valby was doing for this squad last year. Allison Wilson returns, who had a very promising season, finishing 49th at NCAA's. The rest of the lineup, though, you have some incoming international runners. You have some recruits that have come in years past that you could hope improve. But it is going to be very interesting. I think that's going to be honestly one of the things to watch in the early season meets is like, all right, who's running? Like who does Coach Palmer feel like is his best seven? Because that's something that is going to be something we truly just don't know at this moment.
So I think so. Tia Wilson is from the UK, and she's run some awesome times. 8:57 for 3K, 15:39 for 5K. There's a world where she's an All-American, and I don't think we'd be like, whoa. But there's also a world where she's just a 77th place finisher at the national meet, and I think we're like, cool, all right. But so like the best version of Florida's top three means that they're better ranked than this. I think what really comes down to is their other international additions. Schmidt from Australia, Morley from the UK. Morley's run 16:08 for 5K, but that was on the roads, so it's truthfully a little harder to kind of justify that. Schmidt has run 9:23 for 3K, 16:23 for 5K. So these are good marks. I don't know if they dramatically changed the needle. Now, granted, Morley and Schmidt were names that we kind of just found out about, once the rankings were final. But, so could you argue that Florida deserves to be a little bit higher in these rankings? Sure. If you would have said like 21 or 20, I'd be like, okay, fine. But that's about it. I mean, really, because outside of that top three of Olamamwe, Wilson, and Wilson, there's a lot of like, man, these names really need to pan out, and I don't think we have any guarantee that will 100% be the case.
No, and to Morley's benefit, she has run 4:11 in the 1500 meters, so there is a lot of talent there. She might skew more middle distance, which could limit her impact at least from the get-go on the grass this fall. Caroline Wells is also another name to throw in there. Good high school runner transferring in from Stanford who hasn't put it together at the NCAA level. But yeah, I to your point, you see the talent across like these like back 3 or 4 women that they could hope could fill that 4 and 5 spot. And as long as like one of them really comes through, I think that should be enough for them to at least get to this ranking and probably exceed it. So I do like the position they're in it. And I quite frankly just like the way that they're building this lineup for years to come. I think that obviously Olamamwe is not going to be there forever, but they're building a group of international stars that have potential of being here for more than just this year and improving in the NCAA long term.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely now like you can see a bit more of a core. You can see a little bit more of like a long-term viability kind of thing. So yeah, I'm completely with you there. I want to jump off of Florida now, head to the men's side. Going to go to Michigan State. I like them a lot, and I think I'm probably a little bit higher than most, and that's okay. But they return everyone.
Yeah,
everyone from a team that was 5th at Great Lakes, and they were 3rd at Big Tens, and they were 25th at Nuttycombe. And admittedly, those aren't like amazing results by any means. It's not like they really stood out in any dramatic way. However, they return everyone, and not only do they return everyone, but they bring back, in theory, Riley Hogg, who was somewhere in like the top 90, I want to say, at the 2022 NCAA XC Championships. He ran 13:49 for 5K. He is undeniably their best runner. And when you inject his scoring in there to that lineup, this team is a top 25 program. I don't know if they go much higher than where they're at 23, but you get them, plus you get 2 really good distance recruits in Seth Norder and Thomas Westfall. And I struggle to believe how this team won't be noticeably better compared to last year. It's just a matter of how much better. And I think that's the catch.
Yeah, this reminds me, and I feel like I've compared this team to a lot of teams in the years past. This reminds me of kind of the Portland team from maybe Portland men's team from like 2-3 years ago, where it's like it's not really an exciting group of guys, but you just have a lot of like depth, and you just have a lot of guys that can run near each other and pack up. And it's not necessarily going to lead to a high ceiling. Like, I mean, yeah, you did mention Riley Hogue, who could be that like semblance of a low stick for them. But you have just a bunch of guys that can run tightly as a pack. I think that's going to give them a pretty high floor where they're just in a lot of races, and they're just going to beat a lot of teams you don't expect because they just didn't have a bad day. Whereas a lot of these teams ahead of them, if one of their star runners doesn't run well, they're going to drop and plummet. Whereas you have a little bit more interchangeable pieces for Michigan State, where if one guy drops off, someone can kind of fill that gap a little bit more easily. So I think, like you said, I don't think they're like a huge. I'm not gonna put a huge percentage that they finish in the top 20, but I'd be surprised if they finished outside the top 28. Like I just don't think. I think this is a team that is going to be pretty much exactly where we end up. Where we ended up right.
Yeah, and and that's my thing. It's like, okay, fine, they may not have a high ceiling, but a high enough floor, and I'll take that. So, women's side, Utah Valley at 22. Thoughts?
So, remind me, who do they have coming back?
Everyone.
Because everyone.
Per Tiefers, everyone.
Okay, so that was my main question, because yeah, this is a team that finished 23rd at NCAA's. You look at the way their lineup was distributed, and I think it's something that is pretty easily able to be replicated. I think that you add or that just returning everybody with the experience. The one question is, can Morgan Noakes provide that 68th place finish again, and be kind of that quasi front runner for them? But if she can do that and continue to improve, then I think this team has a little bit more upside than maybe we thought coming into the year.
They need more firepower for sure.
Yeah.
Noakes is great. She's not. I think we would more establish her as a lead scorer rather than a lead
right.
stick.
Exactly.
And I think that's kind of the question. I do think though that behind her, that's the driver of how this team will improve, which is their underclassmen from last year, which were, Lydia Buse, who was 16th at Arturo Barrios, right? It was Ari Trimble, who was 20th at Arturo Barrios, and it was Abby Furman, who was 22nd. Those were all freshman, sophomore, respectively. And their pack through 6 runners, 6-7 runners is really strong. Like, they're not, in theory, they're not going to inflate their team score past a reasonable point.
No.
They'll be pretty solid and safe, but I think you and I probably have the same question of like, this is a good team, and the team itself is probably better than the sum of its parts, if that makes sense, which is a good thing. But I think we just struggle to get a good grasp on this, just because it's a little bit of an unconventional build.
No, I mean, listen, this is how their distribution from last year. They were in team scoring. They were 51, 95, 98, 116, 141 for their top 5 spots. And so it's like you just have a group of women that are going to be right around that 100 range, hopefully. And then maybe you get someone else that pops to go with Noakes and is a little bit closer to that top 50. And suddenly they have a little bit of a higher ceiling. Like you said, underclassmen who can develop, so it's not unheard of that could happen. But they feel kind of similar to the Michigan State men, where it's like it's going to be a pack, it's going to be a team with hopefully a higher floor. But unless someone really takes a nice step forward, this isn't a team that's going to be pushing for top 15 finishes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I will say we shouldn't forget that they upset CBU for the WAC title.
That's true. That's a great point.
So, like, there's at least a moment that they can go back on and be like, hey, no, we've done this before, or like we've done this in a microcosm before, and I think that they can at least point to that. So, I'm not ready to like define what their ceiling is, but I think I know, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes any sense.
We feel confident that they have this certain ceiling, but it's not the high level of certainty that we have for maybe Michigan State that we just talked about.
Fair.
I think is a good way.
Fair. Yeah. Cool. All right, men's side, and then we'll wrap up there. Montana State. Do you like the spot for them at 22?
I do. They were one of the harder names, and I don't even know if I put any like in-depth notes for them because I didn't feel strongly about them one way or the other in this spot. So 13th at last year's NCAA meet, they do lose Matthew Ricksman, which is obviously a big loss. But they returned just so many solid guys. You got Ben Perrin, who obviously has done very well in the steeplechase. Owen Smith was 72nd at the national meet last year. Levi Taylor has been very good in the steeplechase, was 138th last year. And you can say the same thing about Rob McManus, who was 165th. You bring in the D3, what's his name?
Will
Owen Kelly, who should hopefully add a little bit of back end scoring for them. This team feels a little rickety in terms of like they need their guys. They're good runners to run well, which is kind of how they've been over the last few years, and they've come through. It's truly amazing to me that Montana State has become such a staple in our rankings over the last few years, considering just the size of this program and where they were previously. But their top guys get it done when you need it. And I think you have to trust that they can continue that consistency and just they can develop one or two more talents to at least give themselves an option if someone in their top 5 doesn't run.
Yeah, I think what people will get caught up on is they'll be like, they were 13th at the national meet last year. They were 13th and they only lose one guy. It's like, okay, sure. But that one guy was their All-American, and he was the guy, which was brutal. And then 2, they were 9th at Joe Piani. They were behind Furman, and Furman was terrible. And at that meet, actually, Furman went on to be great at Nuttycombe. But last year's national meet was an outlier compared to their lead up. It just was. And it's not to say that they weren't talented, but it was like this isn't like a perfect team. I do like that they return a lot of their guys, and I do like that they return Will Kelly or add Will Kelly to kind of offer some stability. I think we question how the steeplechase will translate. I think some guys it will, some guys it may not. But there's at least a core I can feel confident enough being like, you're a top 25 team. From here, let's see what happens. But 22 feels right.
Yeah, I mean, to the people who would push to have them higher, I just think it's like you said, you're losing the one true guy that you felt like were confident in being an All-American. The rest of these guys, it's like, sure, Ben Perrin maybe can be, but it's not like some kind of lock. And then behind that, it's like, who do you feel really good about finishing in the top 75? Like,
yep.
That's ultimately where it lands. It's like, and how high can you finish if you have one guy in the top 50 and then maybe just like a bunch of guys around that 100 range? And
I think in theory
that's depth behind them. You can still finish. You can still have a good finish with that, but like that requires almost everything going well to get to that scenario.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, like the math actually, I think works out surprisingly favorably, despite that.
Yeah. I mean, if you do that ends up getting you about 500 points, which isn't puts you kind of not far off where they were last year.
Well, 500 points in the team score or 500 points overall.
In the team score, if you have depending on where those guys finish near the 100 range, right?
Well, because if you finish 100 last year,
yeah, that would be what
83, right? And so collectively, let's just say it's 80, right? And all 5 of your guys are finishing, let's just say at 100, right? They average out to be 100th place, and let's say it's all 80 points each. Well, then that's not 500 points; that's 400 points. 400. Yeah, so.
Which puts them 16th last year.
Okay, so which is it's about
which again I think that's what we're saying is that seems like the high end outcome. Like if and so I think them finishing near where they did at 13th isn't like out of the cards. Like I think that it would take an exceptional race for them to get nearly that high again, but it's not impossible. But I think their more average outcome is somewhere around
Okay, in that case, I don't disagree. I think that's a very, very good point, and it's just weird to like kind of do that math in your head and be
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, I guess that kind of does work out." Huh, all right, well, okay, so okay, cool. I think this was a productive conversation. I feel like we solved all the world's problems, but this was good. Do you have anything further?
No, that's it. Make sure you guys are watching the site, reading our full team ranking profiles. These are some of the best writing I think we do all year. You really get a sense of how the team did last year, what names to look forward to, keep an eye on in the coming year, and give a much more in-depth analysis of each of these teams than we're able to give on the podcast.
Yeah. This is our best content. It's my favorite content to write. It's a bear, but like I don't really mind doing this at all, even if it's way more. And so, yeah, I'm excited about this. Like, and again, our numbers on the site show it. For whatever reason, Instagram doesn't love. I don't know. Maybe I just didn't do a good job of the graphics this year. I don't know. The numbers on Instagram would make you think that these are a total flop, but they're actually doing extremely well on the site. So, yeah, it's funny how those things work out, but. Other than that, ratings and reviews, YouTube, go get a subscription, and that's it. That's all I got.
All right. Well, until next week, Garrett, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.